If you're here today, maybe the first time or the first time in a long time, so glad that you are at Life Church today. We started a brand new series with you last week. In a series, we just take a topic or a series of topics that are connected, and we take some time to talk about them. So we began this whole series talking about the uncensored truth about sex, love, dating, marriage, and today we're going to get into some kind of heavy stuff. In fact, I'm going to talk specifically to single men today. Single men, we're going to get into some heavy issues towards the end of the message. So mom and dad, if you want to chew some gum right now and then wad it up later and shove it in your children's ears, you can do that, whatever it takes. We're just going to talk to adults for a little bit today. Last week we began this whole thing as we talk about marriage and relationships. The culture, the society, or the upbringing that we're so accustomed to is that we just got to find the right person to marry. I mean, that's just natural. We got to find the right person. We kind of know what we want to marry or don't want to marry. So if I find the right person, everything in this marriage, in this relationship will turn out all right. We found out last week as well that what we don't realize, though, is that how we're dating right now, how we're living right now, what we're doing right now, somewhere along the line in our future, our past, our present right now, where we're living right now, becomes a part of our past. And that past will follow us right into our future. We don't realize it, but married people who've been married for any length of time will tell you, yeah, that's true. That the people I dated and how I conducted myself and that party I went to and that one night thing and there was that guy and all of this kind of stuff, these habits all followed me into our marriage life and it followed us into our house and right into our bedroom. It was all right there. And so I am sharing a series of messages with you so that you can have incredible relationships that are founded the right way, start the right way. And so instead of finding the right relationship or finding the right person, we said you need to become the right person. That's what you need to do. You need to work on becoming the right person. You need to work on your character development. But so often in relationships, maybe you're in a relationship right now, we're not working on character. You know what we're working on? We're working on chemistry. It is so fun to work. We got chemistry. Listen, every couple that gets together has chemistry. And you know how it is. You get together, that first thing, to start dating. And every dating couple, nobody's loved like we love. You got your own theme song. And every time we get into the car to go on the date, that one song just happens to come on. Every time we're just together. And you start... What is love, love, love? Just so that whole thing, and you're singing it over in your mind, and you got the whole chemistry thing going on for you, don't you? But then you find out once you get married and get into the relationship that since you didn't work on character issues, you only worked on chemistry, the relationship starts to tank because you didn't work on some of the things we talked about last week, like patience, which really means you're not pressuring the other person so you can have your way. You didn't work on consideration or kindness. You didn't work on the whole being proud and boastful kind of thing. And so now you're starting to clash in this relationship. And not only is the relationship suffering, the chemistry suffering, it's all suffering, and you come to the conclusion, oh, I married the wrong person. And so we start looking for the right person all over again. So that's kind of where we landed. And then at the end of last week's message, we got into this little verse that's really interesting that a guy named Paul wrote into 1 Corinthians chapter 11. 1 Corinthians chapter 11 we call the love chapter. And we finished on this verse, and we're going to begin with this verse as we look today in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, beginning in verse number 11. Paul says something that's so profound, but we're going to start here. When I was a child, get this is as deep as I get, church. I spoke and thought and reasoned as a child. How many would say you did too? We all did, didn't we? He says, but when I grew up, I put away childish things. And so today we're going to talk about putting away childish things. Men, we're going to talk about putting away some childish things. I'm going to speak specifically to single men who are dating, single men who hope to date, single men who hope to find a wife. But the principles that we're going to share really apply to married men as well. Ladies, really everything I'm going to talk about is just to men today. So if you brought your phone, and you want to surf Facebook and update your status or do some tweeting, whatever it is you want to do, a Snapchat, Instagram, you just go right on ahead. I'm just going to talk to the guys today, right? So, in fact, we could put ladies on one side, men on the other, and I'll just talk to men. We'll just go from there. Men, we're going to talk about putting away some of those childish ways. That's what we're going to talk about. And the reason that I want to speak to men today is because men, realize it or not, you have the biggest influence in your relationship, single or married. Men, there is something in you that God designed as the covering. Now, ladies, don't get all bowed up and bent out of shape on this whole thing. I'm saying God created man to be the covering of the home. He created the man to be the protector of the home, the gatekeeper of the home. Men, if your home is loud, if your home is peaceful, if your home is fun, if your home is stressful, so much of that weighs on our shoulders. And so I think we need to just camp out on this a little bit. I just want to talk to men. And men, I want to talk about how we look at women, how we look at all women, not the women that you're dating, not the women you want to date, the women that you're married. We're just going to talk to men and how we view all women, because we live in a culture that is so counterculture to the Bible and the way the Bible looks at women. In fact, the culture that we live in, when you're watching TV shows, just be mindful of this. When you're watching TV shows, when you've been to the movie or when you listen to music, what is so predominant, there's a predominant theme in there in the way we are to treat women based upon what culture tells us. The culture says this: when it comes to women, you know what you do? Take me, use me, trade me. That's the culture that we live in. You listen to the music that you're listening to on your playlist. For sure, if it's hip-hop, country, pop, it doesn't really matter. It's the same thing. Take me, use me, trade me. You watch the TV shows. What's on the big screen? Take me, use me, trade me. You just take whatever you want from me. You just use me, and when you're done with me, just scoop me along and go on to the next one. Most of the movies, most of the themes of songs are all the same thing. And I'm telling you, church, that the church world, that the biblical world and how God views women and how we're supposed to view women is completely different than the culture that we live in. And so, men, we're going to talk about that a little bit today. The Apostle Paul and a guy named Peter and even Jesus speak on this subject. And when they speak to the subject of the value of women, the men and the women who heard their message when it was originally told would have said, "What are you talking about?" Because before we even get into the word today, I want you to appreciate the kind of culture that Peter and Paul and Jesus are speaking to when we read some passages from the Word of God this morning. Because in ancient Roman culture, and that was the culture that influenced the society in which Jesus and Peter and Paul were speaking, in ancient Roman culture, prostitution was completely legal, it was encouraged. Slavery was completely legal, and it was encouraged. One of the ways that men were getting involved with birth control, the original form of birth control was to sleep with a prostitute. If you didn't want to have children, you slept with a prostitute. If you had slaves and you were wealthy enough to own many slaves or more than one slave, you just slept with your slaves. They had no value. And women in the culture that Peter and Paul and Jesus were living in at the time, there was no value for women. She was just a woman. I got a boat, I got a motorcycle, I got a snowmobile, and I got a woman. In fact, I got 2 women, 3, 4. I got a woman, and she's just a commodity. I take her, I use her, and I can trade her if she's a slave. I can do whatever I want with her. So a woman had absolutely no value in the culture, in the society in which Jesus and Peter and Paul are speaking. And so when we were going to read some scriptures, you have to understand the pushback that the original hearers and witnesses of this message would have felt when they were reading these things that Peter and Paul wrote. In fact, it got so bad in the Roman culture of the time that there was a bill that came before the Roman Senate mandating that husbands and wives start to have children because they stopped having kids altogether. Because why have children? If you have children, it just complicates your life. It just is an inconvenience to you. And if I have children, that means I have to split my estate with them. And I don't want to do that. Why not rather find a responsible man, not even a woman, a responsible man to whom I can give my estate? I will adopt that man. And then when I'm dead, he will get everything that I own. Because in the culture and the time that Peter and Paul and Jesus were living in and writing to, women didn't inherit anything. It didn't matter who you were married to. When you were dead, and you didn't get anything because you were just a woman. You had no status, you had no value, you had no worth other than to bear children and just be there for the man. And so into this, we're going to read some scriptures today that speak against all of those things, and really it addresses where all of us must be when we come to viewing women. And it begins in John chapter 13 when Jesus talked about how we're supposed to treat one another, regardless of gender. In John 13, beginning in verse number 34, Jesus said this to his hearers: love each other. Love each other. Well, it's easy, like my buddies and all. No, love each other. And here's how I want you to love each other specifically. You've been with me for 3.5 years. You've watched how I've interacted with people. You've watched how I've treated people and given them dignity and value and purpose and worth. You saw me touch lepers. You saw me go to the people that were the outcasts. You saw me even talk to tax collectors. And tax collectors were so bad, they weren't even categorized in the same category as sinners. They had their own sin category because everybody hated tax collectors. So he said, love each other. Just as I have loved you, you should love each other. That's how I want you to approach your relationships with people, including women. He goes on to say in the rest of that verse, your love for one another is going to prove to the world that you are my disciples. It wasn't about Bible reading. It wasn't about church attendance. It wasn't about how many scriptures you memorized. It wasn't about how much money you gave to the church. Proof in the pudding that you are a follower of Jesus Christ was how you loved people. And I don't think Jesus changed that message at all. There's the litmus test right there for if somebody is really a follower of Jesus Christ. So Jesus began that whole message of loving each other right there. And then a guy named Paul elaborates on this a little bit in the book of Ephesians, chapter 5, verse number 25, when he says this, husbands. Now, he's speaking to husbands. So husbands, just listen up. This is for you and this is for me. Husbands, this means what Jesus said. This means love your wives just as Christ loved the church. Which the first time they're hearing this letter read in the church at Ephesus, they're going, wait. You want me to love my wife, my commodity, this person who shares the house with you? You want me to love her like Jesus loved the church? Wait, Jesus died for the church. He gave up his life for the church. Yep, that's the way I want you to love your wife. Wait. You mean you want me to defer my power? You want me to just lay down my power, my authority in the house to take care of her? That's exactly what I'm talking about. See, when Jesus was here, he never walked into the room and said, hey, you're sitting in my seat. You need to move so I can sit there. Hey, potluck, I should be first in line because after all, I'm Jesus, which is one step above being the pastor's kid. I should be first in line, right? Okay. When I'm in the room, everybody should notice me. Hey, I'm right here. I'm the most important. When Jesus came into the world, he said, I came not to be served, but to serve and lay down my life as a ransom. So I came here to defer my power for your benefit. And Paul says, man, you're supposed to do the same thing for the women in your life. You're supposed to take the power that God gave you and use it to protect the people who have no power for themselves. Wait. Paul, look. If I have power, power is about getting stuff and getting stuff done and conquering things and having things done for me. And Paul says, yeah, I know that. But in a marriage relationship, if you're going to love like Jesus loved the church, that means you just lay all that down. You just lay that down. It's not all about you. It's just not all about you. You just remember that. So when you're sitting in a couch and you go, honey, how about another cold one right here? Speaking of Diet Pepsi, right? Women, repeat after me. Get it yourself. All right, there you go, ladies. I'm just trying to help you out with this whole thing, all right? That's what that means. That's what that means. That's exactly what Paul is saying in all this. And then Peter chimes in on the same subject. So if you want to follow along, I'm going to go to 1 Peter chapter 3. 1 Peter chapter 3, when Peter talks about the relationship between husbands and wives. And the guy who writes this, Peter, is a disciple who followed Jesus around and watched him interact with people. In fact, on one occasion, Peter saw Jesus sitting down at a well to get some water, and there was a Samaritan woman there. Now, understand in the culture, it wasn't bad enough that she was a woman, it was a Samaritan woman. And Jesus sits down at the well, and it was an incredible thing. Not only did Jesus sit at the well and talk to this woman, he drank water out of her cup. Ooh, girl germs. This is incredible. How many remember grade school getting girl germs and boy germs or cooties? I don't know what you called them. And if you touched a girl, you had to go touch another boy to get it, whatever, just like to brush it off, the whole kind of thing. And so Peter saw this interaction, and he saw that when he sat down at the well with this woman, he gave this woman value and dignity and purpose and worth and hope. And then on another occasion, just 3 chapters later in the same book, Jesus has this woman who's caught in the very act of adultery brought right in front of him. In fact, in front of the whole crowd, she's caught right in the act of adultery. Peter's watching this. How is Jesus going to handle this whole thing? And Jesus takes this woman aside and interacts with her one-on-one. In fact, in Jesus' amazing way of communicating, he eliminated the crowd that was there that day so that Jesus could speak one-to-one with that woman. And he said, in essence, you know what? Leave your life of sin. Your life is worth more than this. You have more dignity. You have more value and more purpose and worth than what you give yourself credit for. Now just stop what you're doing and understand who you are. You are a child made in the image of God. And so Peter saw that. And so into this now, Peter begins to write in chapter 3, 1 Peter chapter 3, verse number 7, he says, husbands, in the same way, be considerate. Now, there's that word again, considerate. We talked about consideration last week, that you're considerate of the other person's needs. As you live with your wives, treat them with respect. Now, this is an amazing thing. When you read this in the Greek, it's my understanding that in the Greek, this word respect, the word that is used in Greek was only used, I think, this one time in the New Testament, which means that when Peter wrote this, I wonder if he got to this spot and paused a little bit and thought, what word can I use that would convey what I'm trying to tell these men? And then he wrote this little word, and coincidentally, it's T-I-M-E. That's the way it looks in English. But the word is respect, and the word means honor, like honor. Another translation of the word means value or costly. In fact, even the word money was put in there. Peter says, husbands, when it comes to how you interact with you need to be considerate of them. And when they come into the room and come into your life and they're a part of your life, you honor them. It's not about you, it's about honoring them and giving them value and worth and purpose and dignity because their father is your father and your father is their father. Now, men who read this or heard this for the very first time would have reacted with like a, what? You want me to treat my wife how? My wife, you know, she cooks, sews, bears children, does the laundry, and takes care of. That's what she's for. I mean, that's why you're supposed to have a woman, isn't it? Woman. And they'd be, what are you trying to tell me? And Peter says, no, I know how you've been thinking about women. Stop thinking that way. Think a little differently now. They would have had a hard time really comprehending all of this. And then he goes on to say, and you treat them with respect as the weaker partner. Now ladies, don't get me wrong here. Peter's not saying anything against who you are as a person. That would really be speaking against what he just got done saying. He's just saying that if you were in an Indian leg wrestling contest, your husband would probably win. That's all that means. He's just stronger than you, physically stronger. And so men, it is our charge, our mandate then to give care or protection for these women. It's to use your power for the sake of those who have no power. To which the men of the time would have said, wait, Pastor, might makes right. Here's why we have power. Power is about getting and conquering and dividing and having and obtaining what I want. That's what we use power. And Peter says, no, that's not how are you going to use power in a marriage. You're not going to do it that way. In fact, he goes on in that in the same verse, he says this is fascinating. He says, as heirs, this really got in their goat, as heirs with you of the gracious gift of life. In other words, Peter's saying, look, you treat your wife with respect. You know why? Because your father is her father. And when she's dead and you're dead, you both have equal access to equal inheritance. You don't get more, because remember in the culture, when the husband died, he didn't leave anything to his wife. And now he's really bending the whole cultural concept, saying that when you all die, look, she has as much access to the inheritance as you do. That you treat her with the utmost respect, understanding who her daddy is. Let me put it in terms that you might understand. That when you come to approach your wife, either as a married couple or a dating couple, and you walk up to her house, and you want to get together and connect with your wife or your girlfriend or whoever it is that you're dating, you just remember that her dad is sitting on the front porch in a rocking chair waiting for you, cleaning his gun. You just remember that, right? That she has so much value in the eyes of God, she has equal access to everything that you do when you leave this life. Every time you look at a woman, I want you to remember something. Men, listen, every time you look at a woman, every time you're eyeball to eyeball with another woman, I want you to remember this, that she is created in the image of God, that she is God's little girl. Every time you look at any woman, you remember who God made her to be. And then he goes on to say the rest of that verse, here's why you need to treat her with respect as a weaker partner, and remember that she's an heir with you, so that nothing will hinder your prayers. Wait, Pastor, you're saying that God might not answer my prayers if I'm not good to my wife? Yeah. And here's the reason I think why. I'm not a theologian, but here's my thoughts on this. If you can't show proper respect to another creation that God made, if you cannot treat with proper respect somebody else who bears the image of God, why should God give any credence to your prayer? Why should He have respect for what you're requesting if you don't have respect for what He's made? So Peter says, look, you need to shape up. Treat your wife right so that your prayers will be answered. Men, let me just tell you something. You can't date a woman like a first century Roman. You can't date like that and treat women like that and then one day on your wedding day put on a tuxedo, get married, and think everything's going to be different. Because nothing's changed. And you know why nothing's changed? Because you haven't changed. And we're going to talk about that as we go on a little bit. You need to make up your minds, men. All of us need to make up our minds. We need to make up our minds that when we look at women differently than our culture looks at women. Because if you remember, culture says, take me, use me, trade me. And men, I think it's incumbent upon us as followers of Jesus Christ that when we look at women, we look at them different than the culture around us looks at women. Let me give you some examples of how you can do this, okay? You just remember this, that every woman is daddy's little girl, okay? Every time you look at a woman, it's daddy's little girl. Now, guys, let me just talk to you a little bit, and we're going to kind of get down to the nitty-gritty here a little bit. And Mom and Dad, if you have little children in here, we're just going to talk about some grown-up stuff. We're going to talk about stuff that I never thought we would talk about in the church, but we need to talk about in the church. So, man, let's just talk about your playlist. Let's talk about the radio station that you're listening to and you go to work in the morning. If the music you are listening to references women with words that I would be too embarrassed or ashamed to use in church, you need to either find a different radio station or delete those songs off your playlist. If you're listening to music that calls women, I'll say it, a whore, you can find that word, or a female dog. I just can't bring because that's not my modern, I just don't use it in my everyday language, okay? So I'm not going to use it here in church. But if you're listening to music that refers to women that way, you need to stop it. And here's the reason why. Because it devalues women. And here's what's happened in human history. Whenever you can give another human being a name that devalues them, you can do anything you want to them and feel no conscience about it. For instance, I might get this wrong. Pastor Andrew, my African brother, there's tribes in Africa, the Tutsis and the Hutus or something, and I just don't remember the whole thing. And there was warring factions, and one started calling the other cockroaches. When you call them a cockroach, you can do anything you want to a cockroach because everybody hates a cockroach. If I'm wrong on that, I'm right on this, that in Nazi Germany, the Nazis began calling the Jews rats. Everybody hates rats. You can do whatever you want to a rat. We did the same thing in our own nation in our references to the Native Americans and the African Americans. When you start to give them another name, a derogatory name, you can do anything you want to them and you feel no guilt for it. And guys, I'm telling you, if you're listening to music that devalues women with the same kind of verbiage, you're going to treat them the same way. Guys, it's time to stop that and listen to something different. Okay? I'm just saying, guys. All right. Okay. We as believers and followers of Christ should be so intolerant of labels. And we should be the ones that lead the way on giving value and dignity to human beings around us, regardless of all these things. Christian culture is a different culture that gives value to women. Coincidentally, when Peter and Paul started talking about the value of women in the church, you can about imagine what happened in the churches in the first century when suddenly value was given to women and they had status. Women began to flock to the church. No other document, and I said this last week, no other document other than the Word of God has done more to give value and worth and status to women than the Bible. The Word of God is what does it, church. I'm just telling you, it's an incredible thing. Now, understand this. The role of a woman should be different than a role of a man. That's God designed, but her status is equal in the eyes of God. Men have no more standing in the eyes of God than a woman does. In fact, some of the most prominent women of the early church, or prominent believers in the early church were women. That's where it all started. No, we talked about playlists a little bit. Let's talk about something else that we live in and we live amongst. Let's talk about pornography a little bit, okay? We're just going to talk about, it could be lit erotica, even women can get involved in this whole thing, but guys, I'm just going to camp out here a little bit with you as I talk to you about this a little bit. The problem with pornography today is it's just so common. It is all around us all the time. And even when you're not looking for it, ladies, I say this all the time, look, your men don't have to go looking for porn. It is looking for them. It is everywhere. It is in print media. It is on the computer. It is on the television with a Victoria's Secret ad. It is on billboards. It is everywhere. It is a visual minefield for your man. And he can get physically exhausted trying to fight this battle all day long. But there are some men that look at pornography as being completely innocent. In fact, this is my escape. This is the way I unwind. Married or single, Christian or non-Christian. It doesn't matter who you are, man. Let me just talk to you for a little bit. Because when you purposely indulge yourself and entertain yourself with pornography, you don't realize it, but you're going to school and you are learning something. Here's what you're learning, men. Let me just talk to you for a little bit. And I know this. I've had men talk to me and just gone through this whole thing. It's every man's battle, I'm just telling you. But when you're involved and engaged in pornography, you're learning three things. Number one, you're learning this. A perfect body isn't good enough. The second thing you're learning is one body isn't good enough. And the third thing you're learning, married, single, doesn't matter, is my wife's body will never be good enough for me. And guys, I'm telling you, if you're in that school right now, ladies, if you're in that school right now, I don't know how it affects women. I'm just talking to the men here for a minute. You need to just drop out of school. Just drop out of class and just get rid of it right away. In fact, if you are going to get into a dating relationship, guys, if you're in a dating relationship right now, you're dating somebody, here's what I want you to do. I want you to take her out for a nice romantic meal. I want you to sit across the table from her. I want you to grab her hand. If you're not willing to let go of pornography, you're not willing to repent of it, you're still going to engage in it, you plan to do it long after you get married, here's what I want you to do. If you're not going to leave it, grab her hand, look at her in the eye and say this, honey, sweetheart, babe, whatever you call her, I want you to know something. A perfect body isn't good enough for me. One body isn't good enough for me. And your body will never be good enough for me. I'm telling you, this issue brings so much confusion into the bedroom. Before marriage, after marriage, it brings so much confusion. Women know that there's something going on. Men are confused. They don't know what's going on. And I'm just telling you, this has such a profound impact and effect on us. We just don't talk about it in the church because it is a little bit on the uncomfortable side, but it's all around us. It's like the elephant in the room that nobody wants to discuss, but we need to talk about it. I just never thought I would be talking about it as a pastor. Now, we say things like this, well, you know, it doesn't hurt anybody. Like, this is my own private little world. Nobody even knows. It doesn't hurt anybody. You know what they did in World War II? In World War II, the U.S. government handed out cigarettes to our GIs like candy because they thought it was harmless. It was a way for them to unwind and escape in the midst of the battle. Then somewhere down the line, they found out, oh, smoking is bad for you. It does hurt you. We need to do something about this. And now you're hard-pressed to find any place that you can smoke. You know what? They used to think that pornography is just a harmless thing. Wink, wink, nod, nod. It's kind of a guy thing. It's not really a big deal at all. Now you know what they're discovering? This rewires your brain. This affects you chemically inside of your head. You don't realize it, but it's having more impact on you. Oh, this is not good for people. It's just an amazing part of the culture that we live in. And you see women on the screen or in the movies, and you know what? I want you to understand, man, that these women were made in God's image. And every time you're there lusting after her, longing after her, whatever the case might be, and you're entertaining yourself in this, you got to remember that's Dad's little girl. And almost all of those women are not there by choice. They're not there by choice. Because in the society that we live in, it's kind of a wink, wink, nod, nod. Well, you know, they're just looking for some extra money. Most of them are enslaved, just like the women of the time when Peter and Paul wrote their words to the church. Same thing. Well, we find out that porn actually is a drug. And you know what it does? It deadens the desire inside of a man that he no longer desires a woman. And you know what happens to a woman when she discovers that a man's engaged in porn? She's confused. How in the world can I compete with that? And the man he's no longer lit up by the girl that he's about to marry or the woman that he's married to, because he's been in school learning that her body isn't good enough, that one body isn't good enough. And so it brings all of this kind of tension into the marriage. Here's what single men, listen, if you're a single guy today, here's what you're thinking. You're thinking, you know what, it's not hurting anybody. I don't have to, this is my own private world. And when I get married, I'll be able to just release that tension. I can just, anytime I want to. Let me just tell you, do you remember what I said at the beginning of last week's message and the beginning of this one? Our present becomes our past, which follows us into our future. And that will follow you right into your marriage relationship. And the unfortunate thing is when you get married, you're going to think, because you have not renewed your mind, you've not worked on becoming the right kind of a person, you're going to think when you get married that you can do all the stuff with your wife that you've been watching online or in the pages of a magazine or whatever the case might be. And she is not excited about that. She's not excited about that. So what are we supposed to do about this? Let's make this really practical. I can tell it's really quiet in here. I want you to think for a moment about a woman that maybe you have never met before, probably have never met before. A woman, guys, I want you to just in your minds now, think about a woman whom you've never met, but you respect and admire greatly. It could be a singer, it could be an actress, it could be somebody who's in a public figure somewhere. And if she came walking into the room, guys, what would you do? You might blush. You might be a little bit of like, I don't know what to say, and a little tongue-tied, and that whole thing, and you'd make sure, here, would you like to sit here? Why don't you sit? This is a good seat. Can I get you a water? Is there anything that you'd like? Do you have everything that you need? This is really amazing to meet you. This is really an honor. I can't even believe that I'm in the same room as you guys. You can put yourself in that position. That's the concept that Peter's trying to get across to us and how we treat every woman. That we would defer. If that person came walking in the room today, they came walking through, hey, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you. I got a special friend. We have friends in high places. Let me introduce you to. And I introduced her, and she came down here, and all the guys would be like, oh, the whole thing. You would defer to her. Whatever she needed, whatever she wanted, you'd make sure she had it. That's the way we're supposed to be with our wives. That's the way we're supposed to treat all women. The one that we want to date, the one we're currently dating, the one we're ignoring her text messages, the one we're not just going, whatever the case is, that's just the way we're supposed to treat all of them. And if you're not going to walk away from that kind of a lifestyle that devalues women, then whoever you date, you need to let them know up front that you're not willing to walk away from pornography so that they have an opportunity, guys, to walk away from you. Because they're worth better than that. So how do we make this practical? Guys, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? You remember again that when you look in the eyeballs of every woman, this is Dad's girl. This is God's girl. Guys, let me just encourage you with something. If you got a phone with you, a calendar with you, however you keep a calendar, and I don't know if, guys, if you're even this organized. Today is the 22nd of February. I would go a year from now and just mark 22nd of February, 2016. And for 1 year, if you need to renew your mind and renew your person, you take that year to do that. Don't you date anybody. Don't you go looking for dates. And here's my concern. Here's my whole concern, even in the church world, because let's just be honest. Some of you are here today scoping out the products, aren't you? Some of you come to church like, I wonder, the single ladies. The whole thing. That's why you come to church, right? Looking for all the single ladies. I'm just telling you, stop it. For the next year, don't look for the single ladies. Ladies, don't you be looking for the man, all right? You be looking for a heart with Jesus Christ. You look to a relationship, you look to better your relationship with God. You look to better your relationship with yourself. You focus for the next 365 days on becoming a better you, on becoming the kind of person that the person you want to marry wants to marry. Now, the amazing thing, guys, here's what a woman is looking for. A woman is looking for a man of integrity, a man of honesty, a man who gives her value and purpose and worth and status, a man who's godly. In fact, I've heard it from more than one woman that says, you know what, when a man is on fire for God, he's hot. Just saying, all right? The problem is, guys, women think that men like that don't exist anymore. And what if for the next year you started trying to become this kind of a guy? who was a man of integrity, a man of virtue, a man who let his eyes bounce off places on women and just bounce up to her eyes and look her in the eye. A man who looked at a woman as somebody who God created in his own image. And for the next year, you start to retrain your brain and your mind on how you start to think about women. And then after a year, no, I'll tell you what's going to happen. This is going to get frustrating. Somewhere in the course of that year, you're going to meet the woman of your dreams. And you're going to go, I made this promise not to date anybody for a year, you know. Don't worry about it. She'll be there. And if she's not, be somebody else, all right? She'll be there. But you need to concentrate and focus on your relationship with God. And when you concentrate on that relationship with God and you become that man of integrity and godly, you're going to catch the eye of some lady. But your ambitions and your energies have not been spent on trying to find the right person, but rather becoming the right kind of person. It's an amazing thing. Now, here's how I want to end today. I think this is a time for us to just, we need to pray and say, God, what do I do with this? Men and women alike might struggle with this whole thing on porn or what you listen to, guys. Maybe you just, like if you're going to start deleting songs that devalue women, you might just empty out your whole playlist. I don't know, you know. But you got to take an honest look at this whole kind of thing, because these girls that are being sung about, look, God made them in his image. I went this last week, the other day, I went to the top 10 songs right now on the pop charts, and I read the lyrics to several of the songs on there. And a lot of the songs, you know what the themes of the songs are? Take me, use me, trade me. Pastor Dan, his video, What is Love? I mean, that's kind of the theme of all the songs that I was looking at. I know where love is found, and I know what it is. It's found in a relationship with God.